Okay,
Thank you.
so we are going international today, all the way from the UK. We have Mike Stevens. He's the founder of Insights Platforms, the leading online directory, learning, and event site for research professionals. Mike is a consultant, advisor, and writer who lives at the intersection of technology, research, and analytics. He's got over 25 years of experience, including backgrounds in various roles at Vision Critical and Kantar. And he also has a consultancy, which is called What's Next Strategy and Planning, that helps clients, agencies, and tech firms develop skills, adopt technology, and implement process change. Next slide. Okay, so for today's topic, last event was focused on AI and job search. Today's topic is going to be focused on AI tools. And I don't know about you, but put a thumbs up in the chat. Who has felt overwhelmed by all the research tools out there? The amount of tools, news, conferences, everybody's talking about AI. So it's easy to feel completely overwhelmed. We're going to help you today. And it's both for if you're working currently in an insights role or if you're a seeker, a great way to stay on top of what's the latest and greatest in terms of AI tools and research. So Mike is going to talk about the categories of research tech, key features you should be looking for, and also how to get the most out of them in a very searchable and manageable, navigatable way. So with that, I turn it over to Mike.
Okay, that's big ambitions for a 20-minute presentation. So, thanks for the billing. Look, for those of you who don't know me, I've just put my LinkedIn in the chat there, and I'm going to be referencing the website that I run, Insight Platforms. So the link is there as well, because there's a lot of free resources there. It should have been on one of the earlier slides because we run virtual events every couple of weeks. We've got webinars. We've got a big event coming up in October, which is about analytics and reporting. So check it out. All of our events are free. Some of our content is paid, and what I'm going to share with you now is a really abridged version of one of our premium courses. I know that a few of you, I can see Pat, you're online. I know a few of you took this course because we gave it away access in a drawing in an earlier session. But this is really just a very synthesized version of something you can find. So we've already had this. You've had me introduced. You don't need all of that. This is what Insight Platforms looks like. Lots of different. There's a huge company directory, loads of on-demand webinars, lots of resources, free learning resources, loads of stuff there. So you can find these types of tools and you can dig into them and work them out. Lots of virtual events. So the one that we do these demo days, we've done virtual events recently on qualitative research, on innovation research. What was the last one that we did? Anyway, I forget. We do so many. So we've also got training courses. Some of these are free. So I don't normally, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat. I don't normally share my slides, particularly because they're part of a paid course, but you can get lots of this content for free on the Insight Platform site. Okay, right. So let's get into the meat of this because we've got a lot, and I'm going to be hopefully not speaking too quick. If you watch the recording back, you might want to slow it down a little bit. But this whole AI thing, it's not, it is new, but it's also part of a continuum. So it's easy to feel freaked out. If you've been around for a little while, you'll remember we were migrating offline to online research at the end of the 90s into the early 2000s. In fact, I'm having a discussion about this with Katrina Noel and of Scoot and Know Insights in a couple of weeks about how these phases keep kind of turning around. We had this huge wave of research tech innovation through the kind of noughts and the kind of teens about integrating tech, about automating, research panels, online qual. And this AI stuff it didn't start with ChatGPT, machine learning, it's been around for a while. There's lots of new tools, but there's also lots of methods in what I'm going to show you, which is not brand new. So we're part of a continuum of development. It's easy to feel overwhelmed because when you look at how many different solutions are out there, and you can find this on the Insight Platform site, it's a landscape of the different categories, the different tools. You can see Kelvin, I know you're online, you can see Rival popping up in different categories there. There's just lots and lots of different solutions that you can go and have a play with, have a look at, use in research projects. What I'm going to do here is go through at a high level some of these different categories, describe what you can do rather than talk about individual solutions, because there are just so many. And when I do that, I always upset someone that I don't mention. So I'm trying not to talk about individual companies. I'm trying more to talk about the capabilities that you can have. And the big message is, just don't freak out about all this stuff, because if you take a deep breath, you'll see that things don't always move as fast as the media likes to suggest that they will. But there is this important kind of law, really, which is we get a new tech, we think it's going to revolutionize things instantly. In the long run, it does have a big impact, but actually we do have time to get used to it. So we overestimate how big it's going to be short term. We underestimate, how big it's going to be long term. And if you look at a lot of the wobbles in the stock market last week, we've seen the negative headlines coming out about enterprise not being able to get value from AI. This hype cycle we're seeing, we're starting to see a lot of the generative AI stuff starting to fall down into this trough of disillusionment. So there's a lot of great applications, there's some fantastic use cases, but it's going to take longer for it really to deliver, productivity for all of us. I'm going to just step through some of these categories now, talk about what's in each of these, how you can use them, and I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with many of these different solutions. But video capture, video really is becoming much more of a default for the way that people communicate, the way that particularly younger generations are happy to share and to capture video. The way we use it for research, there's kind of really two things. It's either sort of real time, or it's asynchronous. It's kind of record a clip and upload it, or we can use this for desktop, for fixed cameras that might be installed, but increasingly it's mobile feedback. Then we obviously doing things like online interviews and groups and diaries and mobile ethnography. A lot of use now for capturing screen recordings for user research, for usability, and even shopper insights for path to purchase. You mentioned Vox Populi earlier as a partner, being able to do video-based surveys or verbatim clips, in context video. So this is even things like having the kind of static cameras in store to be able to capture and analyze. I'm not going to talk about social video in this. I'll if we get enough time, I'll talk about it in the section at the end. But it's it's things like capturing video clips or screen capture, or combining that with other types of feedback, and using AI for transcription, natural language processing, which has been around quite a while, speech to text, so being able to turn what I'm saying into text. I mean, we saw about 50 different AI note takers join the meeting. I know this has been transcribed now. It's all the same sort of stuff, but it massively scales your ability to do multi-language, multi-country research with automatic translation, and then text analytics to be able to identify, topics and themes and so on. And with large language models, being able to make that much more interactive, being able to query, to summarize, to be able to make it easier to process at the end of a project. So, a lot of tools. This is NIT. I said I wasn't going to dwell on individual platforms, but there are some examples in here. So, being able to capture video at scale and then identify themes using the language, using the transcription, analyze that with text analytics and build out themes and sentiment that's contained in what's being fed back. Summarizing the content of video, so focus groups and online interviews that you can very, very quickly get a large language model to then synthesize and summarize. Give you a little report. But it's not just about the language in video. Video is such a rich medium. There's so many other components to it. So computer vision is the other branch of AI, machine learning, that relates to all of these different things. So optical character recognition, being able to read the content of images that are on screen. So it might be a brand label, it might be a price label, it might be a fixture in store. That's increasingly being used and is more accurate. Being able to detect logos and gestures, even being able to detect movement or objects in video. And then obviously using video to detect emotion, often with, facial expressions, but can be other indicators as well. So optical character recognition, this is a little bit small, but this is actually this is a UX project that is screen recording the way in which somebody's ordering from a meal delivery app. And this is from Indemo, and it actually catalogs, you can see on here, it's pizza, and it's telling you when each of these items is on screen. So you can go and search the video and show me all the instances in the video where ham was on screen or chicken. So there's lots of ways that you can dig into that. Some great places you can go and learn more. You can see some good case studies and demos. These are all free resources on Insight platforms, so you can dig into it with Discuss, with VoxPopMe, with Indemo and Knit. So just search for those when you look online. So, the reason why this is getting big, video feedback is natural, it's human, it's much lower cost and much easier with compute power now to be able to store and analyze this stuff for much lower cost. And it's really kind of blurring the boundaries between qual and quant. So whether you call it qual at scale or whether you call this type of rich video, new types of quant data, it doesn't really matter, but it's really blending the traditional ways we've thought about those two things as completely separate. So that's one. Another huge growth area is chatbot interviews and conversational surveys. I'm on a session with Ray Pointer in UMR next week talking about the growth of kind of empathy in AI models. So if you want to check that out, this is really going to be core to how these things develop. So chatbots actually have been around a hell of a long time. One of the very first AI solutions in the 1960s was a chatbot called Eliza for which mimicked psychoanalysts. But a lot of new ones for research especially are built around the GPT model. And just it's kind of built on top of those base solutions. And what we're getting to is a much more natural way of interacting with a computer. So you think surveys had to be predefined in such very kind of rigorous structured ways. Now we can actually have much more open discussions with a model that can adapt to how we're responding. Remesh is a solution that's been using this type of approach for a long time, using traditional AI machine learning. So for large-scale focus groups where the analysis can be synthesized on the fly. Ink is a solution for embedding conversational sort of chatbot style open-ended responses into surveys. In fact, I hardly ever do any proper research, but I was just using the Inca platform now to design something before I joined this call. It's very good for this sort of thing. Lots of other solutions like this. If you look on that landscape map, you'll see about 20 or 30 different tools. So a lot of these are for kind of qualitative style interactions, text driven. Increasingly, they're also using audio feedback. So you speak your response instantly in the background. The chatbot will transcribe, analyze, and then respond to your question with text or respond to your answer with text. So it becomes much more conversational. The reason why this is exciting is because the next iteration of models are going to be what's called multimodal. So they'll have, be able to interpret images, be able to interpret video, be able to interpret much more than just text. And you'll get to a place where, we've got much more empathy and intuition and being able to interpret how things are being communicated in non-verbal ways as well. So there's some good examples here with demos and use cases, customer case studies here. That again, you can go and watch all of these videos for free. So as I mentioned, when you combine this whole generative video, so when you have avatars that can instantly respond to you in a very convincing way, using all of those different inputs that are not just about what you're saying, but maybe your body language or maybe the object that you're holding as you're giving feedback in an interview, you start to get much richer, automated type of responses. We've got this is a rather wordy way of saying, we like to give human characteristics to objects and machines. So we have this kind of propensity to anthropomorphize technology, which actually makes us very susceptible to, to building relationships with these types of chatbots and tools. Ultimately, it's going to reduce costs for getting to more qualitative depth. I think a lot of people will feel a little bit threatened by that. I think what it does is it enriches and creates more volume of high quality data, but we'll see how this plays out. Okay, next, and just shout Brian, Melanie, if you want me to stop, because I'm worried I've not really trimmed this enough to squeeze it into 20 minutes. But one of the big useful areas for a lot of these AI tools are in qualitative data analysis. So it used to be the case that machine learning could do text analysis on verbatim responses quite well. Now that we've got much more large language model based analysis, we can start to interpret qualitative data much better. So it's obviously driving efficiency. If you've done interviews, you've done groups, to transcribe, to generate themes and codes, to summarize, but also the new ways of interpreting or interacting with data by actually chatting and talking with data. So, automatic summarization, there's a lot of specialist qualitative research tools that are emerging. Coloop, you might be familiar with. This is another one called Reveal. You upload the transcripts, you can interact with it. It will summarize and then help you synthesize the data. These kind of chat with data approaches are going to become much more prevalent. So what we have here, this is being able to ask questions of the data. And this applies to quant data as well as qual, but being able to say, okay, can you tell me more about that particular angle, and then it will give you almost kind of like an interactive conversation with the data that you've got. There is a risk in all of this. I'm sure we all feel kind of a bit worried that AI is going to I guess just make things a little bit bland. I mean, this is it's not data driven, but just the idea that what's happening with a lot of large language model data is it is kind of flattening or looking for the central tendency, looking for the common values. And in qualitative research, where I think humans need to watch out is the human insight is often the outliers or the things that wouldn't get averaged out, and missed. So, there is a danger here that, we end up kind of flattening too much by relying too heavily on these solutions. So, we do need to be careful. Lots of good resources. The team from Quillette, actually part of Civicom, have done some great educational webinars on, how to work with this type of thing. So there's loads of stuff that you can learn on the Insight Platform's catalog of webinars and demos there as well. So qualitative data analysis, some of these approaches are quite well established with the kind of tagging and theming and so on. But I think the efficiency around the qual process is a big opportunity right now. A lot of these large language model features are still being tested. You need to handle with care. It's not about, always checking the computer's homework, but do, be aware that you might be kind of flattening out some of the interesting data that's in the extremes. And there are still a few risks around accuracy, around hallucinations, that we need to be aware of when using large language models. Survey creation analysis. This is again a big growth opportunity. Lots of areas of kind of efficiency and new generation here. So the survey generation process, it's kind of very efficient already. There's lots of tools for, you can upload your Word questionnaire, you can use templates. This is really enhancing it even further, but it's also making survey research more accessible to people who are not necessarily expert researchers. So lots of tools have this, language model enhanced way of generating a survey. So you might just put into a prompt and say, I want to find out about X, or I want to test a new idea for Y, and then it will, it will generate your questions for you. I have to say, be careful with these solutions. This happens to be Question Pro. I love the team there. If anyone's on the call, don't hang me for this. But what happens with a lot of these is because they're generative solutions, you'll often, if you enter the same prompt twice, you'll often get different survey suggestions. So you're often better off applying AI in a very narrow way to survey research. So in a co-pilot sense, using it to enhance specific areas of the survey. This is Quantilope, who has specific parts of their survey design capability for suggesting brand attributes or suggesting product features, that type of thing that you can then go and build into a survey rather than actually have it design the entire thing. You can also use tools now. This is prelaunch.com that has the ability to create concepts using images and and text. So in combining those types of generation models for concept testing, lots of other tools have that. And at the back end of the process, technically you could use the foundation models these days for survey analysis. I've played around with the GPT data analysis tools for that. The Claude 3.5 is actually getting very good at interpreting data sets and analyzing it and giving responses. So, you know, if as long as you've got the right kind of data that isn't too, you know, and you've got the right permissions locked down, you can always go and play around with that if you've got a data set of CSV. But this talk to your data thing is happening in surveys as well. So this is MX8 Labs, which is a new startup, a kind of end-to-end generative AI solution. And again, you know, you could ask questions of the data to say, okay, well, you know, what would the answer to this set of questions be? You know, what's the kind of summary for this new question that I've got? So, you know, the survey creation for AI, it's much better as an enhancement than as a kind of entire write me a whole survey project, in my view, right now. This talk to the data interfaces, again, is going to grow quite a lot. And when you combine this with synthetic data, as we'll see, you can do this at an individual respondent level, and you can say, how might you have answered a survey? Or how might you have answered a question that we didn't actually ask? And there's, you know, as I say, there's lots of kind of enhancements based on synthetic data for survey creation and analysis. So loads of great demos and use cases and case studies that you can see here. So you go to the demos section of the Insight Platform site, you can find lots of examples here. Guys, there's no way I'm going to do this in 20 minutes. Melanie, what do you want me to draw it to a close? I know you've got lots of other stuff to cover, or do you want me to flip through some of the more interesting areas in this? No, I think you're muted.
I think we'd love to see a little more, even if it's quick.
Okay, all right, I'll go quick. I'll go as quick as I can. So there's a huge number of solutions in text analytics for verbatim coding, especially the kind of customer experience analytics. And you know, again, this is natural language processing. It's being able to automate a lot of this stuff. Now that we're capturing feedback online, we've got open-ended responses, we can very, very quickly turn them into structured data. So you know, what we've got with solutions like Kaplana, which is automating verbatim coding, then you can visualize very quickly, you know, what the different topics, the different you know, themes and sentiments are that are coming out. There are different spins on this. Canvas has a kind of more of an emotion model overlay for this type of thing. There's a lot of these tools for customer experience feedback analytics. So this is Forrester's Genius Analytics, you know, Medallia, Question Pro, they all have these built in, and then there's specialist solutions for doing that type of thing. If you're a product manager or a UX person, then you know, you'll often be able to very quickly and at quite low cost integrate all your different sources of feedback. So it might be, you know, reviews data, it might be roadmap data for, you know, for product input, and then you can automate the synthesis and analysis of that type of input. So again, there's a great course, actually. This is a free course. So if you want to just dig into text analytics, then Kaplana have done a free course on the Insight Platform site. You can go and choose that. We publish a whole load of stuff on kind of guides to different categories. And so there's this kind of top tools for text analytics article, lots of other stuff that you can go and dig around in there as well. So one thing just to watch out is, you know, if things say they're perfect out of the box, be careful. So often they will need a little bit of fine tuning or tailoring or training beforehand to be, you know, useful for your specific use case or category. But once you've done that, you know, they can often run virtually on autopilot. So, you know, it can be a very rich source of actionable data for text analytics. This was like a 3-hour course, by the way. So I'm sorry if I'm just battling through this. Emotion AI stuff I mentioned earlier. This is a lot of stuff around, you know, implicit system one. That's really kind of come a lot of it from the academic world into commercial applications. You know, some of these approaches you'll probably know quite controversial. We've got, you know, facial coding where people are challenging the traditional method of doing this. What often happens in these tools is a combination of different methods. So you might combine eye tracking with facial expression analysis. A lot of these even have kind of pulse rate or heart rate detection. So there's again, there's some great case studies where you can go and find out more on the Insight Platform's website. So, you know, when you get to a large scale with this stuff, it can actually be quite predictive. And, you know, once we start to use what I mentioned, these multimodal AI models, once, you know, you've got the ChatGPT that's got vision and video and voice, you'll start to be able to get much more data that you can then analyze the different variations in vocal tone or eye movement or blushing or all of those sort of things. You'll be able to build much more confident behavioral models out of this type of AI. Synthetic data, right? Everybody's bogeyman at the moment. So do read that article that that Brian mentioned at the start, because the initial hypothesis was it's all a bit of a threat and it's going to be like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. My counterpoint was, let's be scientific about this and let's establish whether it works, and some approaches there. So it's a bit of a, back and forth and a public debate. Synthetic data is used in all sorts of different industries. It's not unique to research. It's artificially generated data that can be used for like testing systems, for privacy masking, for all sorts of different applications. And we're starting to see much more use of it in market and UX research. You can have a play around at a very basic level in ChatGPT. You can go and use these GPTs, like these user persona generators, and you can talk to them, you can interact. This is really kind of step one on the process. There's a lot more kind of augmented data solutions. You might be familiar with Yabble, which synthesizes data from a whole load of different sources and then, uses it to kind of generate these augmented or artificial personas that can then, you can interact with. So it's a much more sophisticated way of doing it. There have been a lot of validations between primary data and, sort of synthetic responses at scale. So, this is just showing the differences between the synthetic and the primary data responses. Now, my view here is there's an awful lot of answers to questions we kind of already know and have been built into the knowledge that large language models have been trained on. So, you don't need to keep asking the same stuff, but it means primary research then becomes about the really interesting and the really innovative stuff. So you can go and check out some, some demos, some content here. The next step in a lot of this that I'm not going to talk about is agents, so AI agents, which are a little bit more autonomous. You have different agent personas, one of whom might be a consumer in your market, one of whom might be a sensory expert in your business. These are all virtual personas that you can then go and use in the innovation process to interact with each other and then create new products and so on. So, it is going to grow, it's going to increase. Be careful about over relying on it, because like anything, there's going to be crap data, there's going to be terrible stuff, but there's also going to be some really valuable stuff. You're going to get pressure from marketing teams who say, oh, let's just do it with synthetic because it's cheap and it's quick. It's going to be a battle, but there's a lot of valuable stuff here as well. So I would say stay open-minded, stay informed, and follow all the arguments. Yogesh, I think you mentioned Yogesh earlier, is a great resource for expertise and knowledge in this space. I do follow him on LinkedIn. Predictive, just shout or wave if you want me to stop, Melanie. So another angle here is around sort of predictive testing. So this is kind of combining predictive attention models and the kind of neuroscience principles with machine learning. So traditional eye tracking with a webcam, with glasses, we know how that works. We generate heat maps and gaze plots. You can now do a lot of predictive eye tracking with modeled attention behavior. So you can actually say, this is what people would look at, and this is how we're going to create this piece of creative or shelf metric, whatever it is. Kantar now has this predictive concept testing. They've got the predictive ad testing that's trained on the 250,000 link tests. Ipsos launched something recently. There's going to be a lot of research companies with a lot of back data. They're going to be able to build predictive models for all sorts of different things. You've got Vault, which does predictive movie success. So you take a pilot, you can start to predict which elements will drive interest. You've got predictive sensory insights from things like Gastrograph. So there's lots of different, applications for this type of predictive stuff. So examples there that you can come back to. I think what's going to happen is this is going to bake in risk aversion or, best practices into people's workflows rather than it being about brand new insights. The new insights, I think, are still going to come from, from fresh primary research. So about new opportunities, you're more likely to get it in primary research. But it is probably going to shorten and put pressure on timelines as well. Quickly, right, let's look. These are two more left, I think. So, social listening, lots of AI around this for competitor monitoring, trend prediction, that type of thing. This is YouScan solution where you can really have a conversation about social data. If you're not that familiar or confident with social media analysis, it's a great way of using it in a natural language way. lots of visual data on social media now that can be analyzed, can be structured using this kind of visual computer vision machine learning approaches. Brand mentions, how are people consuming a product? Are they inside, are they outside? Lots of different ways in which that can build insights. And approaches that, I think true semioticians hate this, but quantitative semiotics, which is really all about gathering, thousands and thousands of image posts on Instagram, and then understanding how do people behave in a category, what are the different codes that exist, in different kind of consumer territories. Using social media for kind of predictive trend analytics. You probably know about Black Swan. This is AI Palette, which is a predictive kind of food and beverage solution that scans social media for new trends or that sort of thing. Again, lots more examples here. That is also, if you're not that familiar with social listening, that's a really great course. It's only about 90 minutes. It's all on demand. So you can go and do that in the Insight Platforms Academy for free. So there we go. That's social. And then the last one I think in this is about knowledge management solutions and research repositories, because this is a great use case for generative AI. And if you think about, insights teams, you want to be able to ask questions. Imagine having like an expert team member who just knew everything that you'd ever done, all of the data and all the knowledge that you've got. So, these kind of purpose-built insights knowledge repositories are great. They're built on what's called retrieval augmented generation. So RAG, this is something you're going to hear more and more about. And it's important because people don't trust large language models because they generate, they hallucinate, they're creative, they don't give the same answer twice. What RAG does is it grounds the answers in real data. So it says, go and look at this database of stuff, and then synthesize the answer, and then let the language model answer me in natural language. So it combines generative, like a ChatGPT interface, but underneath it, you can rely on the data because it's actually drawing, from a real database or all of your insights, knowledge, and repository. So DeepSights from Market Logic Software, this is a great example. Of a kind of pioneer in this space. Stravito, you might be familiar with, is also another solution in this area, but is much more kind of conversational access to insights and knowledge that you can get hold of. So again, lots of other great demos and explainers and introductions there on the website. The question a lot of people ask is, how is this different to just having uploading all this stuff into ChatGPT or a general purpose solution? It's like anything. These systems that are built for insights, understand insights data, they understand the kind of context of an organization and the questions that people want to ask from a research and insights perspective. So that's what's really different about these sort of tools. That's it, I think. Sorry, never was going to hit 20 minutes, but that's the key message is don't be overwhelmed, get educated, because there's a lot of stuff happening. It is not as freaky as it might look with something like this. And there's plenty of resources where you can go and learn more. Here you go. So that's what we've got. That's me done, I think.